First of all, let's just talk where you see the election right now. When it comes to Florida, Florida looks like it could be a really pivotal state this year. How do you see the Democrats' chances?
I think the Democrats' chances are fantastic. I see enthusiasm throughout our local elections, throughout all of the vote by mails that are record breakings between the early voting, and there's enthusiasm all throughout the state. And it's not just Democrats. As you talk to independents and to Republicans, they're tired. They're tired of waking up every morning and seeing a president who is trying to divide us more, who has really hurt us in the international sphere, who's brought us down and creates anger and divisiveness inside of our communities. So you see this excitement throughout the entire state from across party lines, understanding that we need a president in the White House who's going to roll up his sleeves, come up with a plan, work with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and get things done.
You're here at a down-ballot rally. Florida is a great example of a state where local and state leadership has big impacts on people's lives. I wonder if you can talk about, I saw an announcement that you donated some money to down-ballot candidates. If you want to talk about that, and if you just want to talk about the importance of turnout, not just for this big controversial national election, but also for these candidates that we're seeing here today.
Yeah, as somebody who was in 2018 as a down-ballot candidate, knowing how hard it is to get momentum behind you, raising money, getting out your voice and not being trumped by the larger conversation about the top of the tickets. So I felt it was really important to not only give them financial support, but give them also inspiration and motivation, because it is really hard, being out there on the campaign trail, working day in and day out, especially during this pandemic when you're not able to talk face to face with so many of our voters, being in crowds of people. So hopefully giving them some kind of just pep talks and inspiration, making sure that they understand that why they're running is to serve and to do good for their communities. And during this pandemic, we saw how important our local elections are. We had so many of our mayors and city and council members. They were the ones who stepped up. When our governor didn't hear the voice of the people, had not put in mask ordinances, didn't close down the state, you saw our mayors and the commissioners all rising to the task, trying to protect their own communities. And it's also building a bench. The best way to kind of serve in a higher office is to get the experience at some of the lower levels. And certainly having more diversity inside of our House and our Senate. We have seen Republican legislative rule for 20 years now. And ruling on things that doesn't represent our state. Talking about abortion issues, education issues, healthcare issues, safety for inside of our schools, and knowing that the state is so purple and we are winning by margins of less than 1% on our statewide offices, yet our state elected officials are governing to the right and governing for a very small sector of our state. So having a more diversified electorate, elected officials, is so important to make sure that there's balance inside of government and really serving the whole entire state.
That pivots right into what I wanted to move on to, which is Tallahassee and what your experience has been like serving on the state level. And you're doing it at a historic time. And it makes it probably even more notable that you're the only statewide elected Democrat. And as you mentioned, a very heavily red capital. I wonder, since this pandemic has started, how has that been? How has it been in the cabinet? How has it been working under Governor DeSantis? What have been some of the obstacles?
Yeah, if anybody knows me, I'm somebody who, always works to compromise, bring people together, listen to all sides of an argument, and try to put forth good policy. And really had tremendous hope that this cabinet, that we're all under the age of 50, all with young families, that we were going to be able to come together and do some really good things for our state. Unfortunately, the governor during this pandemic and even beforehand during this legislative session really was starting to govern a lot more to the right. And really during this pandemic listened only to one person, and that was the person who's residing in the White House. And so I certainly didn't wake up on, after winning my election and saying that I'm going to be the counter voice to anything that DeSantis does. That was never my hopes and my wishes. And even still to this day, I would welcome the opportunity to work with the governor to come up with an actual plan of how to get our state back and running. There's no way that our economy is going to bounce back. We saw a 60% decrease in our tourism because of COVID. And people are not going to come and travel to our state if they know that we are open for business and our numbers are going back up. Counties and cities are taking away mask mandates locally. And so, of course, we're going to start seeing rises and throughout our entire state. So it's been a challenge It's been a challenge because I'm trying to protect our entire state, and knowing that we've got an administration that, again, is trying to only make one person happy, and that's getting Donald Trump elected at the detriment of the citizens of our state. But I'm a fighter. I'm somebody who loves a challenge, and so I wake up every day inspired by the people that I hear from, the constituents all across the state, know that I am fighting for them, and I will keep doing what I believe is in the best interest for our state, and that's protecting them.
Staying on this topic of the state rule versus the local municipalities, and how the local municipalities have had to make their own decisions and have sometimes been overridden by the state's decisions, I wonder what your take has been on how we've handled education, how we've handled schools reopening since the end of August. Here in Duval County, we've had several schools that have had to shut down and quarantine because of outbreaks. I wonder if you can talk to that and talk to maybe this, the local municipalities and school boards trying to do things one way and the state saying, we're going to have you do it this way.
Yeah, we first saw this divide inside in Tallahassee when the order came down that we were going to have brick and mortar open by the end of August. And you saw, of course, rightfully so many parents worried and concerned about putting their kids back into school. Schools certainly not having the resources necessary to make sure there's hand sanitizers and separation in desks, and making sure that we're protecting our teachers and making sure we're protecting our school administrators. And so our school districts were at a crossroads. And then the governor, waffled a little bit of, no, it's okay, you can do a hybrid approach. And then when the school districts actually started to do that and try to take care of their own communities, the governor pushed back and said, no, but if you do it that way, we're going to withhold dollars. And instead, our school districts and our school boards and our principals and our teachers, everybody wants our kids back in school. I mean, everybody knows that the best way to learn is face-to-face and to be amongst peers and colleagues, especially so many of our kids that don't have access to broadband and maybe family support at home for learning at home. So everybody wants our kids back in school. But the matter is making sure that we're doing it safely, and that we're doing it, that we are protecting our kids and not putting them in this herd immunity philosophy that it appears that the president and the governor are adhering to.
Right, and I wanted to get your response to on this same topic. Just a couple of days ago, we saw the governor say that he feels like students who are asymptomatic should be able to go back into the classroom, even though the CDC says that they could still spread the virus. He wants them back in the classroom. I wonder what your response is to that.
It's irresponsible and dangerous. That we know that kids, you don't always know if they have a pre-existing condition. A lot of kids, you might not know that. And so you put a child back into a school system that is, even though they're asymptomatic, of course they're going to pass it on to their peers. And not only that, they're going to pass it on to their teachers. And then, they pass it on and they bring it home to their parents and to their grandparents and to their loved ones. So if a child is testing positive, putting them back into the school system and putting them back into schools is definitely the wrong direction for our state.
A lot of people just kind of in discussions since this pandemic has started, watching the governor and watching how this is all played out, have said, I wish there was just a bit more empathy on the state level. Is that something that you hear? Every day.
Every day. I have watched this governor make decisions, and he believes that the data is behind him, and he quotes policy, and he gets up onto a soapbox, but he's not hearing the people of our state. He's not hearing the concerns of, my grandmother who's 90 years old and my mom who went through cancer. Not hearing the concerns of those individuals and those family members. And look, there is no elected official in the entire country who's ever been through something like this. There is no playbook of how to deal with a pandemic and how to deal with a mass loss of jobs and life in a state and in a country. But you know what? You surround yourself by people who understand all the moving parts. You surround yourself by people that are not going to always be yes people, but who are going to have a conflicting, different opinion, and you work it out and you argue about it and you come up with good policy, and you want somebody who is going to listen and care. And there has been zero empathy from this governor. And maybe if he just showed a little bit of it, people would understand that he cares, and not just pushing through a policy initiative and policy agenda that really is dictated by the president. I mean, we heard that last week when the president was here at the rally, that if the state of Florida, if he loses state of Florida, which I am betting on, that he's going to blame the governor. I had sympathy and empathy for the governor at that moment, but certainly that is where he is viewed, is that knows that if the state of Florida goes to Biden, he's going to be out of a job in 2 years.
Talking about the Trump rally, what was your take on that and seeing the governor there, not much mask wearing, high-fiving and elbow bumping and all this in the middle of a pandemic? What's your response to that?
You know, you've got people across our state. Again, we've lost over 16,000 lives. You know, 1.4 million people that are unemployed, don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. And you have a governor who is walking through the crowds, high-fiving everybody like nothing's happening, like no conversation, like the pandemic is behind us, mission accomplished. And so showing that type of leadership sends a really bad message to people who are suffering, people who are scared to go out of their homes, people who have lost loved ones, people who are in the hospital today. And you see a governor and you see a president who doesn't recognize those lives that are out there and lives that we have lost. And until which time that we actually recognize that the pandemic is still happening today, we are never going to get our economy back online. We're never going to fix our healthcare system because it does not seem to be a priority to this administration.
And in addition to the lives that we've lost, due to the health impacts of the virus, our state economy has been absolutely devastated. I wonder if you can talk to where we're at right now in terms of, we're seeing thousands of layoffs in theme parks. I know that different regions of the state are really being impacted. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit to where our economy is at right now, where you see we need to fix.
We are still in a free fall. We are still, our economy, while it's back open, and while our bars are packed in our college towns, we know that my beloved Gators had to cancel our home game last week because there was an outbreak on our campus, and so we know that people come into our state for college football and professional football, and so people aren't going to come right now. And until again that we get the COVID under control, they're not going to come. I have a best friend who lives in Washington, D.C., and she said, look, I was planning on driving down for the holidays to see family. I can't do that anymore. And we're going to continue seeing that, and people are not going out to restaurants, especially restaurants that are not adhering to mask orders or adhering to just safety precautions, CDC requirements. So our economy is still suffering. Especially in the Orlando and Central Florida area, where tourism is such a pivotal part of that economy, and have seen such a significant decrease. And a lot of these jobs are just not going to come back because we just aren't going to be able to build the economy back as fast as we need to.
Staying on the economic line, are there any gripes that you have with the way in which CARES Act money has been distributed in the state?
Well, let's start off with where has it been distributed. Let's start off with the transparency. Even as of today, we have no idea where the CARES dollars have gone. That the governor keeps saying that all the money has been accounted for. Well, accountable to where and to who? We actually have written letters to the governor asking for some of those CARES dollars to go to our schools. We know that there was a $262 million loss to our school systems because of our school nutrition programs being shut down during the height of the pandemic, which means that right now they're suffering. We'll have either schools will have to make a decision to either decrease the availability of food, decrease the nutritional values of school, or have to fire people. So we have asked for some of those CARES dollars to go to our school districts that are suffering. We've seen other states that have used the CARES dollars for childcare, where parents may have had to go back to work, but they can't put their kids back in school, and they've used it for childcare. So we don't know where the money has gone. There's been no transparency, no accountability. I keep hearing from our locals, our local counties and cities that have asked for additional dollars and are not getting a response back, and money has not been released to a lot of our counties. So I have a huge gripe with where the CARES dollars is going because I don't know where it is.
And do you worry that corporations in the state, the biggest companies in the state, may have been receiving some of this money, and then the same workers who work for that company may no longer be employed there?
Oh, absolutely. We saw in the middle of this pandemic that the governor still authorized a tax cut for $500 million to the top 1% companies, and during the pandemic there should have been no tax cut. And instead, if they gave that tax cut, well, then those jobs should still be there. So I am certainly very concerned that, and we saw that even too on a federal level. We saw that $6 trillion was printed, and a lot of that money went right into the stock market to make sure that the top companies were still taken care of, but yet they're still laying off a whole lot of people. And I can guarantee you that the stock market is not duplicative of what is happening on the ground here in our country. We see people that are not going to be able to afford the products and the services that those companies are even providing. So very concerned about where the money is coming from, and the fact that a lot of our big corporations here in our state and our country have benefited and are not seeing a hit like the rest of us. You talk to a lot of the big donors across the state, and Republican donors and Republican corporations that backed Republicans, and they're buying new boats, they're buying new cars, they're building new homes. And that's not what we're hearing on the streets, and people are not knowing where their next meal is coming from. What happened to those people? And instead, we're making sure that we have an even bigger income inequality here in our state. That we call it a K recovery of the economy, where the corporations, the top 1%, keeps going up, whereas the bottom part of our economy keeps going down, creating a K, an inverse reaction to different parts of our economy.
Do you feel Florida is really, because this is a national conversation about where this money is going, where the CARES Act money is going, do you feel like Florida really is ground zero with the amount of job loss that we've seen, the economic hits that we've seen, yet at the same time the company is receiving so much money?
Yeah, we are ground zero. We are a complete picture of what's happening in the rest of the country. And because Governor DeSantis has been so lockstep with the president's economics, with his response to COVID, that if in fact the state of Florida is an example of what the rest of the country would look like in those states if President Trump had his way. If every other governor followed Trump, every state would look like Florida right now.
There is one thing I wanted to ask about coming off the economy, is what Department of Ag has been doing when it comes to testing farm workers. Can you talk a little bit about that, because these are people that we don't hear from a ton, but make up the backbone of our agriculture industry?
And not just the backbone of our agriculture industry. Our farm workers are some of the hardest workers. They are our essential workers. They're ones who are out there crack of dawn to the end of the day, out there harvesting our fruits and vegetables, making sure that we're feeding our communities and our families and our state and our nation. And so certainly, at the end of the harvest last year, we started seeing a couple of the outbreaks in some of our communities, and then a lot of them went into other states. And so we knew that before the harvest, we had to protect our farm workers, make sure that they were receiving all of the appropriate PPP, and making sure that they, in fact, PPE, and making sure that they had testing, and in fact, if there was an outbreak, that there was housing for them, additional transportation. So we had targeted 7 different counties that are predominantly ag counties and have a big proportion of farm workers in there. Worked with University of Florida IFAS, as well as the Department of Emergency Management, to make sure that we are all collectively working together to get testing into our farm communities, and making sure that they knew that we were here to help them and to protect them and to protect our essential workforce.
I have so much I want to hit on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up unemployment. First of all, is this going to be an ongoing topic? I mean, are we going to see this brought up in the legislature, and do you feel this is going to be a point that the Dems are really going to be pushing as legislators return to Tallahassee?
It better be. The fact is that we had an unemployment system that was created in the previous administration, and it was designed to fail. Governor DeSantis knew that on day one and during his transition and through the course of the last year and a half, knew that there was problems with the unemployment system, knew that it was designed to fail, and did nothing. I've called for an investigation with the IG's office to look into not only the creation of the website and Connect, but also the administration of it. And so this has got to be something that we're focusing on. We have to focus on fixing the system. The fact that additional contract to the same provider was just given again, it shows that this is not a priority to the DeSantis administration, not a priority to the Republican legislature, that they have sat derelict in their responsibility during the entire pandemic, never once meeting, no special session to deal with not only the unemployment system, but deal with our budget, our healthcare system, so many things that were impacting people's lives every single day. And this Republican legislature and Republican governor, unfortunately, prioritized their own reelection over the people of the state of Florida.
Unlike the presidential election, we do have our executive branch in for a few more years here in Florida. I wonder, going forward, once we get past this election, presumably we still are feeling the effects of the pandemic, how do you, as the sole statewide elected Democrat, work with Governor DeSantis, with the cabinet, and how do the Dems, if they are a minority come January, how do the Dems work with the Republican majority to fix some of these issues that are really impacting Florida?
Well, first and foremost, I think that people in the state of Florida will be pleasantly surprised. We are going to pick up a significant amount of seats both in the House and the Senate. And so we are going to get closer and closer to a majority, which will be a real reflective of our state. And so the Republicans are going to have to understand that the pandemic didn't hit D's and R's. They hit everybody. And it didn't decide at one door to stop because they're Republican and one door to go into because they're Democrats. That each of them had constituents who suffered. And to go into a legislative session and not hear from those people and not fight for those people, they will be fighting for their own jobs in 2022. And that will be a message that we will continue to cross every single day to make sure that they understand that they have a job to do, and that's to represent everybody, not just the people that voted for them, but for their entire districts. And I will continue to have an open door policy with my colleagues in the cabinet as well as Republican legislators. I'm somebody who's always worked across the aisle, somebody who always likes to bring people together. I have a different perspective of how things should be handled, and hopefully that we can move past this election, which has obviously been emotionally divisive to our nation, and come back together and show what true leaders are supposed to do during a pandemic, and that means coming together and governing together.
What's your overall message to Floridians, R's, D's, and everything in between going past this election and continuing to deal with the impacts of the pandemic?
We are stronger together. We as a country and as a nation have battled wars, have battled civil distress, have battled depressions and recessions before, and we know that the American entrepreneur is the best in the entire world. And so given the tools to be entrepreneurs, to be able to be the great thinkers, we are a beacon of light and hope for the world. And so the message I have is that we are going to get past November 3rd. And when we do, we are going to come back together and we're going to take care of the interests for every single person. And we are stronger and better when we're together.